Hi everyone, Puma here, and for today's video, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on potential new Zygarde forms in the much anticipated, or still not released or even announced, sequel for X and Y. Now I'm pretty late, on commentary about this, a lot of Pokemon news has been released since my last Pokemon Theory video, but I want to go and comment on Zygarde, as well as, a potential connection or a potential hint that the new games Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire have to X and Y, and also how this could affect the next game to come out. Now, Nintendo had a wonderful chance to go and bring back Hoenn remakes back in Generation 5 when they reintroduced Dive as a TM. I mean, we were all expecting it, and then it didn't happen. Instead, we got remakes of Black and White in the form of Black and White 2. But the reason why I think that Nintendo released Ruby and Sapphire remakes in Gen 6 as opposed to Gen 5 was because they wanted to go and tie the lore or the new mechanics of Kalos and Hoenn together. So I'll start with some simple connections that I've looked around the internet and I'm surprised and I haven't seen a lot of people comment on this yet, so I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to go and bring in some connections between X and Y as well as Alpha Ruby Omega Sapphire right away. So X and Y, we've got the blue game in the form of X, and the red game in the form of Y, and then of course Ruby and Sapphire. Ruby's the red game, Sapphire's the blue game. The reason why I think there's an interesting connection is Alpha Sapphire. Alpha's the first letter in the Greek alphabet. Sapphire version, Kyogre controls the sea, all life comes from the sea. X version's the blue game. Its version mascot, Xerneas, is the life Pokemon. It brings new beginnings, new life. You can already see a connection there. And then with the red games, we have Omega Ruby. Omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet, so kind of signifying the end. And Groudon becoming part fire type when it becomes Primal Groudon. Fire, destruction, and then in Y version, the mascot is Yveltal, which is the destruction Pokemon. You already see those connections that Nintendo's hinting at through the version mascots between both games, as well as some hinted at themes between both games as well. Kyogre and Groudon form a trio with Rayquaza, whose ability Airlock negates all weather effects, which include Groudon and Kyogre's abilities. Zygarde's ability R-Break has a similar effect where it reverses the effects of Yveltal and Xerneas' ability, hence effectively weakening them. Now with Primal Reversion, we can already make the obvious assumption that the red and blue orbs are going to trigger the transformations in Groudon and Kyogre. If Primal Reversion works in any way like Mega Evolution, then they need a Mega Stone, and it's pretty much just pointing to the red and blue orbs. There's nothing else about it. Now with the Zygarde forms, I had to think this through because, first off, if Groudon and Kyogre are going to both get Primal Reversions, a lot of fans have been debating this, but I believe that Rayquaza will get at least one Primal Reversion too. Now, the reason why I say at least one is because while they did make in Heart Gold and Soul Silver have, an Emerald or Jade orb for Rayquaza, that wasn't that an artificial orb, or at least in Pokemon Adventures, which is where I'm getting this logic off of. The third, or the Emerald or Jade orb, or whatever you want to call it, was a fake. It's not a real stone. It was meant to be a scientific experiment to control Rayquaza. I think that Rayquaza might have two Primal evolutions depending on the game that you capture it in, and how it would work is that Rayquaza's Mega Evolution depends on which orb it holds. There'd be a Mega Rayquaza, I guess you'd say either Alpha or Sapphire? Yeah. A Mega Rayquaza Alpha or Alpha Sapphire, or a Mega Rayquaza Omega or Omega Ruby. And now, finally, I shall tie this all into Zygarde, because I pretty much beat around the bush here and I haven't even mentioned it that much, other than just its ability. So there are two new moves that people have discovered through hacking the games. Well, they're not really new, it's kind of old news. Like I said, I've been pretty inactive with Pokemon videos. There's Thousand Arrows, which is a physical ground type move that could hit flying types, and it works like Smackdown in that it will prevent them from flying or levitating. And then there's also Thousand Waves, which when it hits the opponent, they can't escape. Also a physical ground type move. Now the reason why a lot of people think that's going to be an X2 and a Y2 as opposed to just Pokemon Z is because of these two moves. In Gen 5, before the sequels were released, there were two signature moves for Cura, which were Ice Burn and Freeze Bolt. And I think a lot of people just assume because there's 1,000 waves and 1,000 arrows, that with two new potential signature moves for Zygarde, that it's going to be X, Y, and X2. I don't think that's going to be the case though. Mainly because, one, 6 games in one generation, I mean, yeah, it's Gen 6, but that's a bit cheesy. That's not enough of a reason. Just stick to one game, right? I don't know, I personally think it's going to be a Pokemon Z, not X2, Y2, even with the revelation of these two new moves. I think that Zygarde will get a new form, and judging from, like, the fact that Nintendo would even bother to introduce Primal Reversion, I have very strong suspicions that Zygarde's going to get a Primal Reversion as opposed to a Mega Evolution. Or I feel like Zygarde's going to get probably just one Primal Reversion, but to trigger the Primal Reversion, it has to hold the red or blue orb in battle. Now, a lot of people would say, what does any of this have to do with it learning the new moves? And that's correct. I mean, if the Pokemon Mega evolves, it doesn't automatically grant it access to new moves. And also, like, even when a Pokemon's, like, holding the Mega Stone, outside of battle, it's just its regular form. But I have a, creeping suspicion that Zygarde can be taught its new moves while holding the Mega Stone. Kinda like how when you give Arceus a Draco Plate, you can tutor it Draco Meteor, but probably a little bit more exclusive than that. So I feel like depending on the orb that it holds, it could learn either 1,000 Waves or 1,000 Arrows. Another reason why I think that Zygarde's gonna get Primal Reversion as opposed to Mega Evolution or a new form is because, again, Primal Reversion, as said when it was first introduced, allowed Groudon and Kyogre to access their hidden ancient power. Referencing the Pokédex entry, it does say that Zygarde will come and reveal its secret power. So I feel like that secret power will be Primal Reversion, which will allow it to just kick ass and do whatever it is that it does, because quite frankly, all we know right now is that Zygarde's the balance between Xerneas and Yveltal. We just don't know how. これはひまちゃんのじゃあね。